Welcome to the Blue White Breakdown presented by PennLive. Johnny McGonigal here with Max Ralph. Max, how we doing? Penn State, they're heading to Fiesta Bowl, play Boise State in the CFP quarterfinals, and we're checking in after a nice little break, right? Like we get the holidays, we get Christmas, New Year's Eve is upcoming. How you been, bud?
Yeah, I'm doing well, Johnny. Good to hop on a podcast again. It's been a little while since at least the two of us have hopped on one, and even you and Bob as well. But great week here. Got to spend some time at home with the family. I know you've seen some family as well. Been really good. Can't complain too much about the break, but it's getting to be time for business again. Like you said, Penn State. The game's coming up. They traveled today, Saturday, I believe. Bob and Joe Herman are going to be out there for the PennLive crew, handling everything. You and I will not be, but yeah, it's exciting. It's been a good week of Christmas for me. Looking forward to New Year's as well, and a lot going on in the Penn State world.
Definitely. No, I mean, a lot of, conversations over Christmas with, aunts and uncles, like who does Penn State play again? Like if they win, who are they going to play? Where are they going to play? So, the CFP fever has swept everywhere. And yeah, look, Penn State with an opportunity on Tuesday night on New Year's Eve against Ashton Jeanty and Boise State. Penn State, significant favorites, notable favorites. I think the line got up to 11 last I checked. So on a neutral field, Penn State a bigger favorite than they were at home in the first round win over SMU, which is notable. I mean, it was a dominating performance, specifically on defense for Penn State against SMU in that first round, 38-10 win. Multiple pick sixes, a couple pick sixes, multiple picks. The Dom DeLuca game caught everyone by surprise.
Right.
Tony Rojas showed off his old running back abilities in high school. Drew Aller didn't have to do too much, but Nick Singleton and Katron Allen handled the load in that running game. I know you wrote about it a couple days ago, Max, that running game is peaking right now at the right time for the Nittany Lions as they go in to face, the best running back in college football, the Heisman Trophy runner-up. And that's been a topic of conversation amongst Penn State players over Zoom who we've talked to over the last few days is, stopping Ashton Jeanty. No one's been able to do it so far.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really interesting. You mentioned talking to family about CFP fever. I've got some extended family there. That a lot of them reside in northwestern Indiana, so I spent a couple days up there. But one of my cousins, as well as one of my uncles, my cousin is a Notre Dame grad. My uncle, for whatever reason, is just a Notre Dame real big fan, and so they all were really getting on me about the fact that Penn State could play Notre Dame pretty soon, but. There's a hurdle to cross first in Ashton Jeanty. You're absolutely right. I think Tom Allen compared him to Derrick Henry this week, which, look, Ashton Jeanty's damn good, but Derrick Henry is on another level and has been for how many years now? So that's a really high
Steelers
praise.
fan, you know that well. As a Steelers fan, you know that well, Max.
Yeah, it's hurting lately. I'll be honest, but I do know that well. But yeah, I mean, look, that just kind of speaks to how good this guy Jeanty is. I think there's a stat, and there was a meme rolling around. Somebody mentioned on Reddit. Well, Ashton Jeanty has like 1,300 yards after contact, but he only has 800 before contact. So if you just don't touch him, he can't do anything.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, that's not how it works.
No.
Penn State has struggled a little bit this season in stopping really good running attacks. We saw it against USC, Ohio State, and Oregon. I do think it's of relative concern. You have to recognize the fact that Boise State does not have the size, the athleticism on the offensive line that those other schools do. But still, Ashton Jeanty is a whole different animal. This is going to be a really compelling game because, Boise State's strength hits right at Penn State's weakness on the defensive side.
Yeah, definitely. You mentioned some struggles against the run. I go back to the final drive of the Ohio State game. After everyone remembers Penn State not punching it in from the goal to go situation, but then at the 1 yard line, Ohio State was just able to kind of bully Penn State a bit and run it down their throats and kill the clock and win the game. And and then at times, Jordan James in the Big Ten championship game with his speed and shiftiness, caused some problems for Penn State's defense on the ground. But I also look on the flip side, Max, and I love Ashton Jeanty. Like, I love that dude. I
Mhm.
was on him as a Heisman dark horse before the season started, and what he's put together this year is ridiculous. He's 132 yards away from breaking Barry Sanders' FBS single season record. The guy has like 2,800 yards, 1,900 of them are after contact, 7.3 yards per carry, and 192 a game.
Mhm.
It's absurd what he's doing. Um, but you look at the competition that they've played, that Boise has played. Mountain West champs, right? They're playing defenses like San Jose State, Utah State, San Diego State, Nevada, Wyoming. Oregon was probably their best defensive test, and Oregon ranks 54th in the country in yards allowed per carry. Penn State is 12th. They're 7th in the country in rushing yards allowed per game. So I think that's where the battle is going to be, right? Like, it makes
Mhm.
sense. It's kind of obvious that it's like, yeah, you got to stop Ashton Jeanty. But I think, Boise and what he's been able to do this year has been so impressive, but they haven't gone up against a defense with the level of talent, I think, at all three levels as Penn State. And the way that Penn State's defense is playing now, too, coming off such a confidence booster in the first round game against SMU, specifically looking at a matchup with, and I know we're going to be previewing the game more in depth
Yeah.
in a couple of days, I think. So don't want to use everything up here. Don't unload the clip, as some people say. But
Right.
Cage Casey, the left tackle against Abdul Carter, is going to be an interesting one to keep an eye on. But Max, I'm going to give you the floor a little bit here. I mentioned the run game peaking at the right time. Just talk a little bit about that and what you've been seeing from Nick Singleton and Katron Allen recently.
Yeah, really quickly, I just want to say it might be a little bit disingenuous for me to have said Penn State's weakness on defense is like stopping the run, because they really are. They've been great against the run this year. Like, Brashard Smith did nothing for SMU, but if you have to pick a weakness, it's probably that they've been hit up the middle a little bit this year. But anyway,
No, that's
um,
fair. It's situational, right? It's
right.
situational. That's what we're talking about. Yeah.
Right, exactly. But yeah, you're absolutely right. The run game. Um, when I asked Andy Kotelnicki about it on Thursday, the first word that he said was consistency, and I think that's a word that gets thrown around a ton in football. No matter what position you're talking about, but when you put it in the context of this Penn State offensive line, it really makes sense because they've had a couple injuries throughout the year. They've got guys banged up, especially losing Anthony Donko for the long term. That one hurt. They've got guys who weren't starters before in their life. Nick Dawkins is onto the scene. Drew Shelton did it as a freshman and was good, but he didn't start at all last year. I'm blanking. Vengi Ioane did last year, but Nolan Rucci barely ever started before Donko got hurt. But now you've got 3, 4, 5, 6, even up to 14 games for some of these guys, and they are really starting to mesh. You can see it when they run, just when they run the football. Like, there have been a couple of times. There was one specific run against Oregon where I think they ran wide zone to the left behind Shelton and behind Ioane, and it was just absolutely beautiful. I think Katron's 25-yard touchdown against SMU as well. They had Wormley pull around to the left side, and it was just blocked up so well. These guys are communicating better up front than they have in the past. They're gelling in a way that they weren't at the beginning of the season, and it helps a lot as we keep talking about. Nick Singleton and Katron Allen are both really healthy. Nick missed that UCLA game. He was dealing with bumps and bruises throughout a lot of the season. You remember back to the whiteout against Washington. He kind of got he tackled and landed on his head weird and was questionable throughout the week. But he ended up playing and playing hurt, and that's one thing that really hinders a running back, maybe more than other positions, because of the wear and tear that hits your body, the amount of times that you're touching the football. And we also saw, if you think about that UCLA game, when Nick wasn't playing, Katron wasn't as effective. It's just the truth. Those two are so much better when both are playing and both are playing well. They are both capable of hitting the defense for a big play. Nick really has shown that top end speed, the breakaway 40-yard run that we haven't seen from him last year. I just think, like, to say peaking at the right time is like another cliche thing, like consistency, but it's really true. They have looked really good against two pretty solid defensive fronts in Oregon and SMU the past two games. And I think it's interesting that Andy Kotelnicki was pretty honest with us on Thursday as well. He said, I tell the offensive line every day that we go as far as they do. And it's true. I mean, you got to have your big boys carry a team. And if he says that in a public setting, and he says the buy-in, the effort that these guys are playing with right now is on a level that we expect it to be, that bodes well for Penn State. I mean, this group is humming. That's the easiest way to put it.
Yeah, and then you combine that with what we saw from Drew Aller in the Big Ten championship game, the way that he stepped up. And I know that some people want to harp on the couple mistakes, especially the first interception, which was essentially a pick six, right? Putting them at the doorstep. But you look at the overall film and the overall tape of what he did in that game, it was super impressive. Had NFL people talking. And, you know, he didn't really have to do a whole lot in the SMU win. I mean, it was a windy day. I'm not giving him excuses because he didn't look great. It wasn't like a phenomenal performance from him by any means, but he also didn't really need it to be with the way the defense gave them an early lead, and then the run game in those conditions were able to just see them through. So looking forward to seeing how Drew fares in the Boise State game, in the CFP quarterfinal out in Arizona, which will certainly be a hell of a lot nicer than it was, in Beaver Stadium for that first round game. Max, quickly, speaking of Drew, speaking of Bo, I think we talked a lot about Bo's decision to transfer, Bo Pribula's decision to transfer, but I don't think we've addressed it on the podcast where he landed. That's Missouri, heading to the SEC. Interestingly, Matt Zollers from Springford, Penn State recruiting target, 2025 signee, is also at Missouri after signing there. So, as they look to replace Brady Cook, a couple of a former Penn State quarterback and a quarterback Penn State would have liked to have on the recruiting trail, will be competing in that room for that spot. Quickly, what do you think about the match for Bo and heading down to the SEC?
Yeah, look, I think it's really perfect for what Bo was probably looking for. Go probably a step down in program size as far as like playing in a top 10 team for Penn State versus like a little bit lower top 25 team that is still in a power conference, a chance to start right away. I think it's exactly what Bo was looking for. I think when you look at the fact that they have Zollers as well, you might start to wonder about the Missouri Tigers probably have a pretty good NIL fund over there.
They do.
And I think Zollers is an interesting one too, because Bo and Zollers have both worked out together in the offseason in the past. There's been some videos surfaced of them throwing together. I think it's a really cool pairing. I think Missouri is going to have pretty solid quarterback room moving forward, but I am really fascinated to see if and when Bo takes that starting job, how he handles being a full-time starter. I always thought the kid was supremely athletic and, as hard a worker as they come at Penn State, and just kind of got snake bit by the fact that there's a future first-round quarterback ahead of him.
Yeah. And look, Drew is, I think at this point, you can say, looking ahead to 2026, going to be in that first-round quarterback conversation. He would be in that conversation this year if he had decided to leave. But we'll see how Bo does down in Missouri, down in the SEC. Looking forward to that. We talk about an outgoing, Max. There have been a couple of incomings for Penn State in the transfer portal, in big ones too. Yeah, a couple of wide receivers. Devontae Ross, most recently from Troy. Kyron Hudson, who we saw up close at USC when Penn State played out there, had a touchdown catch against Penn State. Had a ridiculous one-handed catch in the opener against LSU, a productive player. So Penn State adds 2 wide receivers in the transfer portal. They also add Anai White, a defensive end from Texas A&M, a Philly guy who is probably more of a project, but at the same time,
Absolutely.
like Penn State needs depth. They need depth and a project or two at defensive end and a former 4-star talent. So where do you want to start on the portal? And which of those 3 guys intrigues you most?
Well, I'll start with the idea of who intrigues me most, and I think it's absolutely Anai White, just because of the fact that this is a former top Pennsylvania guy that Penn State was able to bring back. I mean, that's the formula, really. If you look throughout, ever since the transfer portal became what it is now, James Franklin always wants to go get those Pennsylvania guys. He wants to get guys that he's recruited in the past. But Anai White is so interesting to me because I think that there's, like, you can almost kind of compare him to Nolan Rucci for a lot of reasons, like both top Pennsylvania prospects that dealt with, maybe not putting on the right weight that is needed to play at their size at their old schools, not ever really breaking through the starting rotation. White only played in one game this past season. He preserved his red shirt, but he's playing at 6'5" and 240. Now, if you want to compare him just a little bit to deny Dennis Sutton, Penn State has him listed at 6'5", 266. I mean, that's a huge difference. Like, Abdul Carter is at that 6'3", 240, 245 range. If you add those 2 extra inches on White, you're talking about a guy who's a little bit skinnier on the edge and is not getting after the passer, is not stopping the run, as quite an effective level. So I really think that what Penn State did with Rucci, where they helped him put on 15, 20 pounds to get over that 300 mark, and he ended up being a really good player. He's kind of starting to reach his potential a little bit more. I think if they could try and do that with White as well, it's going to be huge. And we talk about defensive end a ton, especially when we were previewing the portal, because this is a group that really needs some help. Abdul's off to the draft, no doubt. Deny is, who knows? If I had to make a prediction, I think he'd come back, but he has an argument to make either way. There's, they're going to lose Smith Vilbert, I believe. Amin Vanover, I believe, is also gone. There's a lot of room for depth at that position. And the last thing I'll say on Anai White before I let you talk a little bit about receivers, Johnny. Last thing I'll say, he is that Imhotep Charter connection. There's still a 2025 prospect out there from Imhotep Charter that Penn State would really love to have, that happens to play at the same position, and I believe has some level of relationship with Anai White, because there has been some social media cross postings when White committed to Penn State. Zahir Mathis, the name that I think a lot of the Penn State fans know. I believe he's number 2 in Penn State in the class of 2025 right now. He's actually, I think he might be 3 or 4, because Zollers is 2, I believe. But either way, top in-state prospect, decommitted from Ohio State, guy Penn State really wants to go out and get late in the cycle here. He won't sign until February. I think he knows Anai White. I think there's a relationship there. This is that's my pick for most intriguing. But let's talk receivers.
Yeah, look, I totally get it, and I don't blame you at all for going with Anai, and I'm glad you did, because for me it's the wideouts, and it's wideouts. This has been an issue for this team, for the last 2 years. We've talked ad nauseum about it, and looking at what they'll have next year and what they won't have. They won't have Tyler Warren. They will not have Tyler Warren, the Mackey Award winner, a Heisman vote getter, finishing 7th in the Heisman, which is the highest in years that a tight end has finished there. And it was warranted, right? It was warranted.
I saw that. I saw that.
There you go. 88 catches, right? If not more now, after the SMU game, over 1,000 yards receiving. This guy is a target machine for Penn State and Drew Aller this year. We all know this, and he's going to be off to the NFL. And so they're going to have to rely on their actual wide receivers next year. They don't have a ridiculous do-it-all versatile tight. I mean, they do have talent at tight end still.
Oh, yeah. They're still going to use them a lot.
Yeah. Rappelier, Reynolds, Dinkins, they've got a deep room there, and they're going to continue to produce at the tight end position. But at the same time, the wide receiver spot is the spot for me that coming into the portal that they needed to firmly address. And they have done it. Bringing in Kyron Hudson, like I mentioned, is a good add, a guy who has competed and played at USC. And so at that highest level, and now, in the Big Ten this year, Pac-12 prior to that, productive player. And then you take a shot on a kid from Troy in Devontae Ross, who was uber productive, this year, 76 catches, over 1,000 yards, 11 touchdowns, big play threat. Ranks among the top players in the country in terms of catches of 20 and 30 yards or more. So bring some explosiveness and some juice to a passing offense that could certainly need it looking into next year. So, yeah, I like what they've done in the portal so far, Max. I think there's still some more room for other additions. Again, wouldn't be surprised if they try to bring in a third wide receiver at this point. There's guys out there still looking for a new spot, and Penn State would love to be that for them. But yeah, I mean, to going into the portal, and we talked about it on a podcast a couple weeks ago and have written about it, that really the two needs that coming into the winter portal window was wide receiver and defensive line. they've addressed at least wide receiver and defensive end. I still think they would like a defensive tackle.
100%.
David Blay going to Miami, I think hurt was a little surprising there. They thought they were going to get him in the door, the Louisiana Tech defensive end, defensive tackle. But so some prospects still out there in the portal, and it closes for entries, I believe today, the 28th, right?
Yep.
But anyone who's still in the portal and anyone who is on a playoff team, once they get knocked out, they get that 5-day window after the fact. So still some room to maneuver and some time to maneuver.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised either to see them target another wide receiver. I think that they've done really well so far, like you said. You might look at Kyron Hudson and say, well, his stats weren't really that good on a team that wasn't that good, but he had over 400 yards and I think 30 catches, right, for USC. Harrison Wallace has 43 catches for 686 yards this year. Penn State's second highest receiver right now is Amari Evans with just 19 catches and 360 yards. Actually, if you want to go by catches, it's Nick Singleton with 39. So if you're even getting that level of production from Kyron Hudson, it's a huge boost. And then you kind of take the flyer on Devontae Ross, who also is important to say, he'll probably come in here and compete to be a returner, especially on punts, which has been a position with some question marks. Zion Tracy's come in and done a pretty good job of it in the latter half of the season. There's some promise with Tyseer Denmark, but it never hurts to have a guy who's done it before, especially a guy who had a 77-yard punt return touchdown against Iowa this year. He played against Big Ten competition, had a long receiving touchdown in that game too. So really interesting guy. I know when he visited Penn State, I was told that this was a guy that they were really trying to get. And I'm not sure whether if that is I honestly think that's probably a combination of things. That one, he's a productive guy who has some potential, a little bit on the smaller side, 5'11", 170 pounds. So they'll need to add on that. But I do think that part of it was a sense of urgency with this early window starting to close and all the receivers that they had targeted committing elsewhere. I think about a guy like Justin Bowick, who went to Illinois, Eric Rivers, who went to Georgia Tech. They missed on a couple, but they hit with Ross. And it's a guy they're excited about. It's a big ad. Hudson's a good ad too. But keep in mind, the spring transfer window is still coming. There are going to be a lot more guys who go through spring ball and learn, okay, I don't have a place on this roster, or learn, maybe I'm good enough to go play at a higher place. Penn State's going to add in the spring too. At receiver specifically, you got to wonder what's the next step for a guy like Tyseer Denmark in his second year. A couple of these freshmen they're bringing in could contribute early. They've got 4 of them right now. It's going to be interesting, and you hit the nail on the head as well. Defensive tackle, they got to add. They got a visit from LSU, from a former LSU guy. I believe his name was JVR Scruggs. I apologize if I got that wrong. But yeah, looking to add at linebacker too. I think that's a big one that just needs one depth guy, because I think chances are Kobe King is probably back next year. And Tony Rojas takes another step, but I think they just need a depth guy at linebacker. So there's some names out there. They're going to keep working, but I'm with you. I do really think that this has been an effective portal so far for Penn State with a lot of work left.
Yep. Hey, look, it's been good so far. It could be a little bit better. Like you mentioned, the wide receivers and Rivers, and Malachi Fields is another one who transferred.
That's a huge one I missed.
Yeah, who transferred from Virginia to Notre Dame, and Penn State thought they were. I mean, they were in good position to get him, and the obvious connection being Marcus Hagans, Penn State's wide receivers coach, recruited Malachi Fields to Virginia when he was at Virginia prior to joining Penn State, but he goes to Notre Dame. So that was a bit of a miss. But at the same time, look, a couple wide receivers in, a promising defensive end in, have to address defensive tackle still. And like you mentioned, a depth piece at linebacker would be nice. But, still some room to maneuver, time to maneuver. As of right now, though, the focus is on Boise State, as James Franklin would say, and the Fiesta Bowl, the CFP quarterfinal. Follow Bob and Joe Hermit, our great photographer, will be out there for that game. So follow their stuff as they get down to Arizona. I believe they're traveling today or tomorrow. And so, they'll have everything covered in terms of interviews and game coverage. We'll be chipping in as well from the comfort of our couches, Max.
That's right.
And then, fingers crossed. If they win and they play, in the CFP semifinals against Notre Dame or Georgia, I believe all of us will be down in Miami for the Orange Bowl. So, looking forward to that. If that comes to pass, got to stop Ashton Jeanty first. And we'll be back in a couple of days to do a deeper dive into the Fiesta Bowl, into the CFP quarterfinals. But just wanted to catch up with everyone. It's the holiday season. It's a lot going on though, still, no doubt. So it's been good catching up with you, Max, as always. Any closing thoughts before you send this thing out?
Nah, just hope all the fans have a happy holiday season, a Merry Christmas, a Happy Hanukkah, a Happy Kwanzaa. If I missed anything there, but just it's the most wonderful time of the year, Johnny.
Hell yeah, absolutely. All right, for Max Ralph, Johnny McGonigal, Blue White Breakdown presented by PennLive. We'll be back later this week to do a deeper dive into Penn State, Boise State.